If you play with Eastern or Continental grips, hitting high bouncing topspin balls that are shaped like an egg up around your earlobes can be really difficult. I'd like you to consider some do's and don'ts and my suggestions to help you deal with this shot. First of all, the most common tendency is to raise the hitting shoulder and swing straight across. On a high bouncing ball, even though the ball's up around shoulder height, people think, well, the ball's kind of high, I have to hit down. And what happens is you'll hit the ball in the net or hit it short. Even on a shoulder high ball from the baseline, you have to swing low to high. On a shoulder high ball, if you swing straight across like this, the ball goes down, you would have to hit the ball 200 miles per hour in order to clear the net because gravity pulls it down too quick. I don't know anybody on the planet that can hit 200 miles per hour. So the first thing you have to remember is you have to swing low to high. How low do you have to get the racket? At least 1 foot below the contact point. So if you're hitting a ball that's up shoulder height, you have to drop your racket down at least 1 foot lower than that point to ensure net clearance. Okay, the problem is when you're using a Continental or an Eastern grip, when you drop the racket head down to swing up in order to clear the net, the racket face will generally be open at the contact point. If you're holding a Continental grip, notice how the racket face is open. Even with Eastern, the racket face is slightly open. So this would require a wrist adjustment and a forearm adjustment as you're hitting the ball. And it's tough to be consistent when you do that. My recommendation is to learn to hit the ball with a semi-Western grip. Now, I know a lot of people, when you talk about changing grips, they get very nervous, but believe me, once you try it, you'll pick it up in a week or so. Okay, first thing, where do we position the hand on the racket handle? All racket handles are octagonal, or 8-sided. We're going to give those sides numbers. Okay, starting on top, we've got number 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5 would be on the bottom. Now it's the same for the other side for a left-handed player. 1's always on top, 2, 3, 4, 5's on the bottom. Okay, now where do we position the hand on the racket handle? Using the index knuckle on the inside of the hand where that X is, and on the heel of the hand I've got another X there. We're going to put those X's on number 4. So when we have the racket here, when we go to number 4, okay, I'll put the X on 4 here and the heel of the hand on 4. Now I've got a semi-Western grip. And notice how the racket face is closed now. Now what happens is when you have this closed face racket, a closed face racket, when you swing low to high, naturally becomes vertical at contact. So it's closed here, but as I swing up, it naturally becomes vertical. Now you just finish, you're swinging up, and that gives you net clearance, but it doesn't sail long because you're imparting topspin. Okay, when you first use a semi-Western grip, many times the ball will be going down in the net. That's because you're not used to getting the racket low enough. Your racket's up too high. So when you first do this, you might, think of a couple of things like drop the racket down 1 foot below the ball before you swing up. Many times if you keep the hitting shoulder lower and the rear leg lower, that makes the racket drop down. Another good thing you might want to try is aiming for the back fence, and you'll be surprised that the ball will be sailing over the net just about 4 to 6 feet and landing nice and deep in the court, even when you're aiming for the back fence. So that's the idea. Remember, you might want to think of 1 or 2 things, as I mentioned on the first tape. So on this one, you might be thinking, drop the rear leg 1 foot below so that you're always dropping the racket down below the ball. So we've got a high one, you're thinking 1 foot below and swinging up with that semi-Western grip. And you're dropping the rear leg and swinging up as you hit. That will give you net clearance, and it'll give you the feeling for hitting with a semi-Western grip. You just have to aim higher now to get your net clearance, aim for the back fence, and that will give you a nice deep shot. Another mistake players make on high bouncing balls is that they drop the elbow in too close to the body. For instance, when you're like this and you've got your semi-western grip, your elbow's up away from your body. But when the elbow drops into the body, watch what happens to the racket. As the elbow drops in, the racket face opens up. Now, once you have an open face racket, again, you've got to close it on the contact point. You want to keep the elbow up away from the body. That way the racket face stays closed. So that might be one thing you'd want to think of, elbow away from the body. So as you're practicing, you're thinking elbow away from the body, and then drop it down a foot below and swing up. If the ball's high, again, elbow away from the body and swing up. That'll give you net clearance. And when you keep the elbow away from the body, the racket face does not tend to open up. Once it opens up, again, you have to make that perfect adjustment.